My mother-in-law called me useless, while giving my husband a key to her house. Leave her after the cake, she whispered. I smiled, served dessert, and handed out copies of what I'd found under his bed. They weren't laughing anymore. I heard my mother-in-law lean over to my husband at his birthday dinner and whisper, "Just leave her after the cake." She thought I couldn't hear. He was wrong. And by the time dessert arrived, I'd already decided that neither of them would be leaving that table with their secrets intact. The ledger I'd found that morning, the one hidden under our bed, the one tracking every dollar Mark had stolen from our account to fund his mother's fake wealthy lifestyle, was about to become everyone's problem. I placed a copy beside each plate, right next to the cheap sheet cake I could barely afford. Let me tell you how I got to that moment and why revenge tasted sweeter than any birthday dessert ever could. Before we continue, thank you for being here to witness Kayla's journey. If you believe honesty matters more than comfortable lies, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us share more stories of courage. Now let's see how this unfolds. But first, you need to understand what my life looked like before I found that notebook. Before I knew the truth. Back when I still believed Mark's lies and thought our money problems were somehow my fault. My alarm goes off at 5 every morning in our cramped Columbus apartment. Not because I'm a morning person, but because I need 90 minutes to mentally prepare for the day ahead. Before my feet even hit the floor, my brain is already calculating. Rent is due in 3 days, $100 we barely have. My student loan payment auto-deducts tomorrow. $340 that'll wipe out most of what's left. The grocery budget is already stretched so thin I've been eating ramen for lunch 3 days straight. I work 2 jobs just to keep us treading water. My main income comes from medical billing at a clinic downtown, 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. It's mind-numbing work. Insurance codes, claim denials, angry phone calls from patients who don't understand why their procedure wasn't covered. I'm good at it though. Efficient. The kind of employee who never misses deadlines but also never gets raises because there's just no room in the budget. At 5:15 p.m., I clock out and drive straight across town to my evening shift at a retail store in a strip mall. More standing. More smiling. More folding the same shirts customers pull apart 30 seconds after I've organized them. I work until closing, 9 or 10 depending on the day, then drive home exhausted, grab whatever I can microwave in 5 minutes and collapse into bed around 11. I see Mark for maybe an hour a day if that. Usually I'm eating standing up at the kitchen counter because sitting down means acknowledging how bone-tired I am, and if I acknowledge it I might not be able to get back up. He's usually on the couch, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up when I walk in. "Rough day?" he'll ask, not really listening to the answer. "How's work?" I'll try, already knowing what's coming. "Slow. You know how sales is. Feast or famine." Except we've been in famine for 8 months straight and I've been doing all the surviving for both of us. The apartment feels smaller every week. Not physically, it's a standard 1-bedroom, modest but adequate when we first moved in. But the walls seem to close in more with each passing month. Unopened mail piles up on the kitchen counter because I'm too anxious to face another bill I can't pay. The clutter isn't really about mess. It's about avoidance. Every envelope represents another number I'll have to juggle, another creditor I'll have to negotiate with, another piece of evidence that no matter how many hours I work, we're always behind. It's just a rough patch, Mark tells me whenever I work up the courage to mention our finances. My commissions will pick up soon. You know how it goes. But I don't know how it goes anymore. I used to believe him. Used to think we were partners working through hard times together. Now I'm not sure what we are. Mark has changed in ways I keep trying not to notice. He comes home later now, always with explanations that sound just a little too smooth. Traffic was bad. A client needed a last-minute meeting. He ran into an old buddy at the gas station and they got talking. Each excuse makes sense individually, but together they form a pattern I can't quite name. When I ask about our joint account balance, he gets vague. Dismissive. Sometimes irritated, like I'm nagging him instead of asking a legitimate question about our shared money. "I'm handling it," he says in a tone that shuts down further conversation. When I suggest maybe he could cut back on his weekly guys' nights, just temporarily, just until we're more stable, he acts like I've accused him of something criminal. I need to network, Kayla. That's how sales works. You can't just sit home and expect clients to materialize out of thin air. He used to be different. Back when we first got married, Mark was attentive, playful. He'd dance with me in the kitchen while waiting for water to boil. He'd leave little notes in my lunch bag. He'd actually defend me when his mother made one of her cutting remarks. Now conversations about money trigger something defensive in him, a wall that slams down so fast I've learned to just stop talking mid-sentence. You worry too much, he tells me, like my anxiety is the real problem here. I've started noticing other things too. Small things that don't quite add up. New running shoes he swears were on clearance, but when I checked the store's website later they were full price, $140. Restaurant charges on our credit card statement that I don't remember us making. Cash withdrawals that Mark dismisses as gas and groceries, even though we just went shopping and his tank was full yesterday. When I ask about these discrepancies he turns it around on me. Are you tracking my every move now? Do you not trust me? You're starting to sound paranoid, Kayla. This isn't healthy. And maybe he's right. Maybe exhaustion and financial stress have warped my perception. Maybe this is what happens when you work 80 hours a week and still can't get ahead. You start seeing betrayal in every shadow because you're too tired to see anything else. The intimacy between us has completely vanished. We share a bed but exist in separate silences. I feel more like his roommate than his wife. Some nights I lie awake wondering if there's someone else. If that's where the money goes. Fancy dinners with another woman, hotel rooms I'm unknowingly funding. The thought makes me sick, but at least it would be an explanation. The truth I'd discover was somehow worse. There is a third person in our marriage, but she's not a mistress. She's Lorraine, Mark's mother. And her presence in our lives is suffocating. Lorraine visits often enough that I've stopped being surprised when she shows up unannounced. She's always dressed like she's on her way to somewhere important. Designer clothes, expensive handbag, jewelry that catches the light. She tours our small apartment with thinly disguised disappointment, running her finger along surfaces, commenting on how cozy everything is. When Lorraine says cozy, she means cramped. She criticizes everything. My wardrobe is too simple. Our furniture is too college apartment. She asks, every single visit, why we haven't bought a house yet, as if down payments materialize through positive thinking and good intentions. She loves bringing up Mark's ex-girlfriend, Courtney. Such a lovely girl, Lorraine will say, looking directly at me. Came from a good family. Had such refined taste. I always thought she and Mark made a striking couple. Lorraine hosts family gatherings at her country club and makes sure everyone knows the score. She paid for Mark's college education. Built character, she says. Meanwhile, Kayla chose student debt as if 18-year-old kids from working-class families are just too irresponsible to be born into money. Every visit leaves me feeling hollowed out. Small. Less than. Her perfume lingers in our apartment for days afterward, like physical evidence of everything I'm not. Polished, successful, worthy of her son. And Mark never defends me. Not once. He retreats into silence or makes excuses. She's just old-fashioned, he says, like that explains casual cruelty. She means well, he insists, though I've never seen evidence of it. I learned to bite my tongue during Lorraine's visits. To smile until my jaw aches. To absorb her comments without reacting because fighting back only makes things worse. Mark punishes me with days of cold silence if I dare object to his mother's treatment. So when Mark's birthday approached and he insisted on a proper dinner with his family, I knew exactly what I was in for. Another performance. Another test I'd inevitably fail. Just keep it simple, he said, barely looking up from his phone. Doesn't have to be fancy. But simple to Lorraine means catered. And we don't have catering money. We barely have grocery money. I spent my lunch breaks that week planning a menu I could actually afford. Clipping coupons. Buying store brands. Already bracing myself for Lorraine's barely concealed disappointment. 6 people confirmed initially. Then Mark casually mentioned a couple of cousins might come. Then an aunt. The count kept changing and he never asked if we had enough food. The morning of the dinner I was running late. I dropped an earring while getting dressed and got down on my hands and knees to find it in the dim space under our bed. That's when my fingers brushed against something that shouldn't have been there. A small leather notebook. Wedged between the mattress and the wall. I pulled it out, curious, opened it, and saw Mark's handwriting. Neat columns. Dates. Dollar amounts. My stomach dropped as I started reading. Transaction after transaction. Money I didn't know was missing. Entries labeled casino, and personal, and most frequent of all, FEF, family emergency fund. One note written in Mark's casual shorthand made my blood run cold. L's club dues. K doesn't know. L was Lorraine. K was me. And I definitely didn't know. I sat there on our bedroom floor, the stupid earring forgotten, reading through 18 months of systematic theft. Our money, my money earned through exhaustion and sacrifice, funneled to his mother while I worked myself to the bone and she called me useless. Everything suddenly made sense. Why we were always broke. Why Mark got defensive about money. Why Lorraine could afford country clubs while I clipped coupons. I'd been funding my own humiliation. I heard Mark's key in the door and quickly shoved the ledger back under the bed. My hands were shaking. My heart was hammering. But when he walked in asking what time people were arriving for dinner, I somehow managed to smile. 6 o'clock, I said calmly. I didn't tell him what I'd found. I didn't tell him what I was planning. I just started making his birthday dinner, already knowing how it would end. I stood there holding that coffee pot, smiling at Mark like nothing had changed, while inside my head everything was reorganizing itself into a completely different picture. Thanks, babe, he said, taking the mug without really looking at me. What time did you say people were coming tonight? 6, I repeated, my voice steadier than I expected. He nodded, already scrolling through his phone. Cool. I'm gonna hop in the shower. Long day ahead. The moment I heard the bathroom door close and the water start running, I moved. Fast. Deliberate. I pulled the ledger back out from under the bed and opened my phone's camera. My hands were steadier now, functioning on some autopilot I didn't know I had. I photographed every single page. Every column. Every entry. Every damning notation in Mark's careful handwriting. 18 months of theft, captured in 63 photos. I shoved the ledger back exactly where I'd found it, wedged between mattress and wall, and transferred the photos to a cloud backup. Then another. I wasn't taking chances. By the time Mark got out of the shower, I was dressed for work, bag packed, looking completely normal. He kissed my cheek on his way to the kitchen. I smiled. Said something about traffic. In my car, I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes before starting the engine, just staring at my phone screen, scrolling through the photos. The numbers were worse than I'd initially realized. $200 here. $800 there. $1,500 in a single day last March. The amounts varied, but the frequency was relentless. I opened our bank app and started cross-referencing. Every ledger entry matched. Every single one. Withdrawals I'd questioned. Transfers I'd been told were for investments or work expenses. That $1,200 Mark said went to fix his car. There it was in the ledger, marked FEFL's property tax. My commute to work blurred past in a dissociative haze. I kept seeing numbers. Dates. The casual shorthand Mark used like this was just routine bookkeeping and not systematic deception. The family emergency fund entries always spiked after Lorraine visited or called. Always. I could map her presence in our lives by the money that disappeared afterward. The weekend she came over complaining about her situation. $900 gone the next Tuesday. The phone call where Mark stepped into the bedroom and closed the door. $650 withdrawn that Thursday. I started remembering conversations differently. All those times Mark said we couldn't afford something. New tires for my car, fixing the leaking faucet, contributing to my sister's medical fundraiser. Now I understood why. The money existed. It just wasn't for me. It was for Lorraine. Last summer, Mark's cousin got married upstate. Beautiful venue. Weekend trip. I wanted to go so badly, but Mark said we couldn't swing the hotel cost. $200 felt impossible, he'd insisted. We fought about it. I ended up missing the wedding, telling everyone we had work conflicts. I pulled up the ledger photo from that same week. July 14th. FEFL's club annual dues, $1,800. I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too hard to drive safely. At work I was useless. I sat at my desk processing insurance claims by pure muscle memory while my brain spun through 18 months of lies. Every time Mark had said, "We're broke." Every time he'd made me feel guilty for wanting something small. Every time he'd suggested I was being irresponsible with money. He'd been gaslighting me while funding his mother's lifestyle. I pulled up old text messages. Found one from last spring. "Mom's going through a tough time. Just need to help her get through this rough patch. You understand, right?" I'd interpreted that as emotional support. Thought Mark was being a good son, spending time with his struggling mother. But the ledger told a different story. That week alone, $2,400 in FEF payments. During my lunch break, I sat in my car and did something I'd never thought to do before. I looked up public records for Lorraine's house. The beautiful home she'd lived in for 20 years. The one she always made sure to mention she owned outright. No mortgage, unlike some people. Except there was a mortgage. A second one taken out 3 years ago. And a lien filed last year by a credit card company. And property tax records showing she was 2 quarters behind. The wealthy facade Lorraine maintained so carefully. The designer bags, the country club, the luxury car, was collapsing behind the scenes. And Mark had been propping it up. With my money. Our money, technically. But I was the one earning most of it. I was the one working 80-hour weeks. I was the one sacrificing. And they were both benefiting. I returned to work but couldn't focus. My supervisor asked if I was feeling okay. I mumbled something about a headache. Not entirely a lie. By 3 p.m. my skull felt like it was splitting. I clocked out at 5 and drove straight to my evening retail shift, but the whole thing felt surreal. Customers asked questions and I responded automatically. A woman wanted to return a blouse without a receipt. I processed it. A man needed help finding a specific size. I found it. My body performed the tasks while my mind ran calculations. The dental work I'd postponed because we couldn't afford it. $100. That was less than Mark sent Lorraine in the first 2 weeks of January alone. The nights I'd eaten ramen and toast so we'd have enough for decent groceries. While Mark's ledger showed restaurant charges and cash withdrawals I never saw. My best friend's wedding last year. I told her we couldn't afford the hotel. She'd offered to let me stay with her family. I'd still said no because I couldn't afford the gas, the gift, the bridesmaid dress. I'd cried alone in our apartment that weekend, feeling like a failure of a friend. The ledger from that month showed $2,200 in FEF payments for Elle's car lease and Elle's insurance. A coworker touched my arm. Kayla, are you okay? You've been folding that same shirt for like 5 minutes. I looked down. He was right. I forced a smile. Yeah. Fine. Just tired. You sure? You seem really out of it. I'm fine, I said automatically. The same lie I'd been telling everyone, including myself, for months. She didn't look convinced but let it go. I finished my shift at 10, exhausted but wired, my mind too active to consider sleep. On my way home I passed a 24-hour print shop and pulled in on impulse. The clerk barely looked up as I used their computers to access my cloud storage and print every single ledger photo. Twice. The printer churned out page after page of Mark's handwriting, his neat columns, his casual theft documented in black and white. I organized everything into a folder. Added bank statements I'd already saved as PDFs. Credit card bills. A timeline I'd started constructing that showed the pattern clearly. Lorraine visits or calls, money disappears within days, Kayla gets told we can't afford whatever she needs. The evidence told a story that was impossible to deny. This wasn't confusion or poor money management. This was deliberate, systematic, coordinated between Mark and his mother. The clerk charged me $18 for printing. I paid with cash I'd been saving for groceries. I sat in my car in that empty parking lot, folder in my lap, and cried. Not the hysterical sobbing kind of crying. Just steady, quiet tears running down my face while I stared at documented proof that my husband had chosen his mother's pride over our partnership. Over my dignity. Over the future we were supposed to be building together. When I finally drove home it was nearly 11. The apartment was dark except for the kitchen light. Mark had gone to bed. The grocery bags from this morning sat on the counter, exactly where I'd left them. He hadn't touched them. Hadn't started any prep for tomorrow's dinner. That was my job apparently. The birthday cake sat in its plastic container. Sheet cake from the discount grocery store. The best I could afford. I'd agonized over even that $12 purchase. Next to it sat the ingredients I'd carefully budgeted for. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would impress Lorraine. Just adequate. Barely. I stood in that dark kitchen and felt something inside me crystallize. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder. Clearer. The understanding that I'd been playing a game where the rules were rigged and I was always meant to lose. I sat down at our tiny dining table and pulled out the ledger photos again. Read through them with fresh eyes. That's when I noticed details I'd missed before. Small notes in Mark's handwriting next to certain entries. Elle's car payment. Elle's credit card min. And one that made my breath catch. Elle's club dues. Kay doesn't know. Kay doesn't know. He'd written it down. Acknowledged it. The deception wasn't accidental or thoughtless. It was intentional. Calculated. He knew he was lying to me. He knew he was stealing. And he'd documented it with the casual confidence of someone who never expected to get caught. I thought about Lorraine's visit last week. How she'd looked around our apartment with thinly veiled contempt. How she'd commented on my outfit, thrift store chic, how resourceful. With that smile that wasn't really a smile. I'd been funding her ability to look down on me. I'd been paying for my own humiliation. The grief and fury braided together in my chest, indistinguishable from each other. I sat there for a long time just breathing, just thinking. I could confront Mark privately tomorrow morning. Demand explanations. Insist on counseling. Try to salvage this marriage through conversation and compromise. Or I could make sure that when the truth came out, it came out in front of everyone. No chance for spin. No opportunity for Lorraine to play victim or for Mark to gaslight me into doubting what I knew. I looked at the birthday dinner supplies. The cake. The budget groceries. The copies of the ledger in my folder. And I started planning. I woke at 4:30 a.m., a full hour before my alarm, with that folder of evidence still spread across the dining table and a plan crystallizing in my mind. Mark was still asleep, snoring softly in our bedroom, completely unaware that his birthday was about to become unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. I moved quietly through the apartment, gathering the groceries I'd left on the counter last night. Chicken breasts that needed marinating. Vegetables to chop. Side dishes to assemble from scratch because buying pre-made anything wasn't in the budget. My hands worked with mechanical precision, mincing garlic, measuring spices, arranging everything for maximum efficiency. My mind, though, was somewhere else entirely. Rehearsing. Planning. Running through different versions of how tonight could unfold. Would Lorraine try to leave immediately? Would Mark attempt to spin some explanation? Would anyone believe me, or would they think I'd fabricated everything out of spite? I showered and stood in front of my closet for longer than necessary, finally pulling out a blouse Lorraine had commented on months ago. "Trying too hard, dear," she'd said with that razor blade smile. "Sometimes simple is more appropriate for your situation." I put it on deliberately. Applied makeup with steady hands, studying my reflection for any visible cracks in the composure I'd need to maintain for the next 12 hours. When Mark finally woke around 8, I brought him coffee in bed. Kissed his forehead. The gesture felt surreal, like I was watching someone else perform an action my body executed automatically. "Happy birthday," I said, injecting warmth I absolutely didn't feel into my voice. He smiled, still half asleep, taking the mug without really looking at me. "Thanks, babe. You're the best." The best. I almost laughed. "What time is everyone coming again?" he asked, scrolling through his phone before he'd even taken a sip. 6, I said for what felt like the 100th time. "Perfect. This is gonna be great." He had no idea. None. I returned to the kitchen and continued prep work while he showered. The performance felt both empowering and nauseating. I was acting the role of devoted wife while planning his very public exposure, and some small part of me wondered if this made me just as deceptive as him. Then I'd remember Al's club dues. Kay doesn't know written in his casual handwriting, and the doubt would evaporate. Around 10 my phone buzzed. Mark, texting from the living room rather than just walking into the kitchen. "Can you make those bacon wrap things? Mom loves those." "No, please." "No, if it's not too much trouble." Just an expectation that I'd comply. I typed back, "Sure." Another text 5 minutes later. "Also remind me, you got white wine, right? Mom doesn't drink red." I had bought the cheapest wine the store carried. Whatever color it was would have to be good enough. "Got it covered," I replied. Third text. "Did you get the good paper napkins? Aunt Linda notices that stuff." I stared at that message. We were barely scraping by and he was worried about premium paper napkins. "Yes," I lied. "I'd bought the generic ones. Aunt Linda would survive." When Mark finally emerged from the bedroom around 1, fully dressed and clearly restless, he immediately started rearranging things. The centerpiece I'd put together from grocery store flowers wasn't positioned correctly. The forks needed to be exactly 1 inch from the plate edge. The living room pillows weren't arranged properly. Just wanted to look nice, he said, adjusting and critiquing. You know how Mom is. I knew exactly how Mom was. That was the problem. Oh, by the way, he added casually, not looking at me, I told Marcus and Jessica they should come too. That's cool, right? Marcus and Jessica. 2 more people. 2 more mouths to feed with food I'd already carefully portioned for 8. Sure, I said, my voice flat. No problem. Great. He smiled, oblivious. This is gonna be perfect. I watched him fuss over the table setting, adjusting a fork here, straightening a glass there, and felt a strange detachment settle over me. Like I was observing a stranger who happened to wear my husband's face. This entitled, thoughtless man who'd been systematically stealing from our future while treating me like unpaid help. I added 2 more place settings without another word. My silence, as always, was mistaken for agreement. While Mark retreated to the living room to watch television, I slipped into the dining room and opened the buffet drawer. The folder of printed ledger pages sat inside, exactly where I'd placed it this morning. I touched it once just to confirm it was real, then closed the drawer. Everything was ready. Guests started arriving around 5:45. Mark's brother Derek and his wife came first, bringing a bottle of wine and easy conversation. Mark's cousin Andrew arrived next with his girlfriend. Then Aunt Linda, Marcus, Jessica. And finally, at 6:20, fashionably late as always, Lorraine made her entrance. The apartment seemed to shrink when she walked in. She wore a designer dress I recognized from a department store window. Easily $500. Her handbag was new leather with gold hardware that caught the light. Expensive perfume announced her presence before she'd even cleared the doorway. Darling, she greeted Mark with air kisses, then made her rounds with other family members, dispensing hugs and cheek kisses like a queen greeting subjects. When she reached me, her smile tightened into something that didn't reach her eyes. Kayla, how domestic you look. Thank you for coming, I said evenly, refusing to take the bait. She moved past me, already surveying the apartment with that performative interest I'd seen 100 times. Running her finger along the bookshelf, examining it briefly before wiping her hand on her napkin. Commenting to Mark loud enough for everyone to hear, "Still in this place? I thought you'd have moved by now." "We're comfortable here, Mom," Mark said, but his voice held an apologetic edge that made my stomach turn. "Comfortable," Lorraine repeated, making the word sound like a criticism. Well, different people have different standards, I suppose. During pre-dinner drinks, Lorraine held court in my living room, my space, my home, telling stories that positioned her as Mark's perpetual savior. How she'd sacrificed everything to send him to good schools. How she still helped with his various needs because a mother's work never ends. How she'd always envisioned him with someone who matched his potential. That last comment hung in the air while she looked directly at me. The other family members offered polite laughs or uncomfortable silence. No one challenged her. They never did. I served appetizers, the bacon-wrapped things she'd requested, cheese and crackers I'd arranged carefully, and accepted compliments with gracious smiles while Lorraine's eyes followed me with naked contempt. I caught her whispering to Aunt Linda at one point, "Some women marry for potential, not achievement." I set down a tray with precise control and thought, not much longer now. Dinner itself proceeded with surface-level warmth. Family members praised the food, which was genuinely good despite, or maybe because of, my exhausted perfectionism. Mark soaked up birthday attention, beaming at compliments, telling jokes that landed well enough. Lorraine dominated conversation as always, discussing people I didn't know from places I couldn't afford, making sure everyone understood the difference between her world and mine. But beneath the pleasantries, I noticed things I'd probably always noticed but never let myself acknowledge. The loaded glances between Mark and Lorraine. Small nods. Knowing smiles. Private jokes told with just eye contact. They had a language I wasn't part of, shared secrets that excluded me from my own marriage. I was mid-conversation with Andrew about his new job when I saw it happen. Lorraine leaned close to Mark, her hand on his arm, her lips barely moving. The table noise should have covered it. Multiple conversations happening simultaneously, silverware clinking, someone laughing at the far end. But I heard her clearly. Maybe because I was already hyper-aware. Maybe because some part of me had been waiting for exactly this. Just leave her after the cake. 5 words. Casual. Matter of fact. Like discussing weekend plans or grocery lists. Mark didn't protest. Didn't look shocked. Didn't defend me. He just gave a small nod and changed the subject, asking his brother about the upcoming football game. The ease of it took my breath away. They'd discussed this before. Planned it. Decided together that I was disposable, that my usefulness had expired, that I could be discarded like furniture that no longer matched the aesthetic they wanted. And they'd do it after cake. After I'd served dessert. After I'd played my final role as the dutiful wife. Something cold and focused crystallized in my chest. Not hot rage, that would have been messy, loud, uncontrolled. This was different. Clear. Like everything suddenly coming into sharp relief. "Excuse me," I said, standing smoothly. "I'll get dessert ready." No one paid particular attention. Just polite nods, continued conversations. I walked into the kitchen, my hands perfectly steady now, and opened the buffet drawer. The folder sat there ready. I'd organized everything this morning. Ledger pages, bank statements, a simple timeline showing the pattern. I pulled out the cheap sheet cake from the refrigerator. $12 at the discount grocery store. The best I could afford while funding Lorraine's designer lifestyle. I arranged copies of the ledger pages on a serving tray beside the cake. One stack for each person at the table. Evidence and dessert served together. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just felt calm. Ready. Let's see who leaves whom. I walked back into the dining room carrying the tray with both hands, steady and deliberate. The sheet cake sat in its plastic container on one side. On the other, neat stacks of paper. One for each person at the table. Conversation continued around me. Someone was telling a story about a vacation. Laughter punctuated the end of a joke I hadn't heard. Normal birthday dinner sounds. I set the tray down in the center of the table and began placing a stack of papers beside each plate. Methodical. Precise. Like I was dealing cards. The conversations tapered off as people glanced down, mildly confused. Mark's cousin picked his up first, squinting at it. Aunt Linda adjusted her reading glasses. Derek's wife unfolded hers carefully. Mark's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to pure panic in the span of 3 seconds. His hand shot out instinctively, reaching across the table like he could somehow gather all the copies before anyone read them. Too late. "I thought we'd share something important with Mark's birthday cake," I said, my voice calm and clear in the sudden quiet. "A complete accounting of where our money has actually been going." Lorraine's sister, Patricia, had her reading glasses on now, scanning the first page with increasing focus. "What is this?" "That's Mark's handwriting," I said simply. "His personal ledger. Tracking 18 months of transactions from our joint account." Mark made a sound, half protest, half plea. "Kayla, this isn't. We should talk about this privately." "Privately?" I repeated, still standing, not aggressive but absolutely immovable. "The way you and your mother privately decided to drain our savings? The way you privately lied to me about where our money was going." I pointed to the highlighted sections on their papers. Casino withdrawals I was told were work expenses. Transfers I believed were going to retirement savings. And this, I tapped the page, the Family Emergency Fund. Which isn't a fund at all. It's direct payments to Lorraine. The word Lorraine instead of mom or his mother landed with intentional weight. "This is absurd," Lorraine said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle. "This is private family business and quite frankly I don't appreciate." "Is this from March?" Patricia interrupted, pointing at a specific entry. "This $1,800 payment?" Silence. "Because that's the same month you told me you couldn't help with mom's nursing home costs. You said you were completely maxed out. Said you'd contribute when things improved." Lorraine's mouth opened. Closed. No words came out. Andrew, Mark's cousin who worked at a bank, let out a low whistle as he flipped through pages. This is systematic. Look at the frequency. The amounts." He looked up at Mark with something close to disgust. "You were pulling from your household account multiple times a month." "I was helping my mother through a difficult time," Mark said, finding his voice but not his conviction. She needed my money?" I cut in, my voice still level. "Money I earned working 80 hours a week? Money I earned while you told me we were broke, while you made me feel guilty for wanting to buy groceries that weren't expired." Derek's wife was reading intently now, her finger tracing down a column. "These dates," she said quietly. "Mark, you borrowed $800 from us last October. Said you had unexpected car repairs." She looked up at him. "There's no car repair entry here. But there's a $1,200 payment to Elle's property tax, the same week." Derek's expression changed. I watched him reassess everything he thought he knew about his brother. "This is a misunderstanding," Lorraine tried again, but her voice had lost its commanding edge. "Mark was being a good son, helping during a rough patch." "A rough patch?" Aunt Linda spoke up, her voice sharp. "You hosted that country club luncheon in April. I remember because you made sure we all knew about it. The one with the live music and the fancy menu." She held up the papers. "There's a payment here for Elle's club annual dues. $2,000. In March." The table had gone completely silent now except for the rustle of papers as people cross-referenced dates with their own memories. "The car you said was a lease deal," Marcus said slowly. "Is that actually a lease, or were those Elle's car payment entries covering something else?" Lorraine's face had gone rigid, her carefully maintained mask cracking visibly. "You told everyone I was the reason Mark couldn't get ahead," I said, and my voice finally carried an edge. "You said I was bleeding him dry with my student loans and my expensive lifestyle. You called me useless to my face." I gestured to the papers in front of them. "I've been funding your expensive lifestyle while working myself unconscious. Every country club lunch. Every designer bag. Every time you looked down at me for being poor, I was paying for your ability to feel superior." "How dare you?" Lorraine hissed, but there was panic underneath the fury now. "How dare I what? Tell the truth? Show people what you've both been doing?" Mark's brother Derek had been silent, reading through everything with systematic focus. Now he looked up at Mark. "You asked me for money 6 times last year. Said you were behind on rent, said Kayla's medical bills were crushing you, said you needed help getting back on your feet." His voice was quiet, but the betrayal in it was obvious. Were any of those things true? Mark couldn't meet his eyes. "Answer him," I said. "Some of it was true," Mark managed. "We were behind sometimes, but you were making us behind," I finished. "By stealing from our account to give to her." I let that sit for a moment before continuing. My hands were steady. My voice was clear. I'd planned this, rehearsed this, and now that it was happening I felt almost detached. Clinical. "When my sister needed help with her surgery bills, you said we couldn't afford to contribute. That was July. The ledger shows you sent your mother $2,200 that month." I looked at Mark directly. "When my father died and I needed money for the funeral, you said we were tapped out. That was September. You gave your mother $1,900 that week for her credit card minimum." His face was ashen. "When I asked why we couldn't afford new tires for my car, you said money was tight. But somehow there was always money for her." Aunt Linda spoke up again, her voice shaking with anger now. "The vacation you took last spring, Lorraine. The one you said was paid for by a friend. Was that a friend, or was that your son's money?" Lorraine tried to rally. "I don't have to justify myself to any of you. How I manage my finances." "With our money," Patricia interrupted coldly. "It seems like you've been managing your finances with money stolen from your son's household." "It wasn't stolen," Mark tried. "I chose to help." "You chose to lie," Derek said flatly. "To her. To us. To everyone." The truth was reconstructing itself in real time around the table. I could see it happening, the pieces clicking into place, the reassessment of past conversations, the uncomfortable recognitions. Mark's cousin spoke again. "This is textbook financial abuse. You drained a shared account without your partner's knowledge or consent. You gaslit her when she questioned the finances. You prioritized your mother's wants over your wife's needs." He wasn't asking. He was stating facts. Throughout all of this I remained standing. Answering questions when asked. Providing context when needed. Not crying. Not yelling. Just presenting the evidence and letting it speak. Because the evidence was damning enough on its own. "I'm sorry," Mark said suddenly, desperately looking at me. "I'm sorry, okay? I was trying to help my mother. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought. You thought I wouldn't notice?" I asked quietly. "Or you thought I'd be too tired and beaten down to do anything about it?" He had no answer for that. I took a breath, steadying myself for the final piece. There's one more thing you should all know, I said, my voice carrying across the silent table. Right before I brought out dessert, Lorraine leaned over to Mark and whispered something. The room was perfectly still. She said, "Just leave her after the cake." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched understanding ripple across faces. Mark's expression confirmed it before he could even try to deny it. The guilt was written plainly across his features. Lorraine's face transformed, panic giving way to cold, cornered fury. "That's not, you misheard," she started, but her voice was shrill now, defensive, stripped of its usual authority. "I heard it perfectly clearly," I said calmly. "They were planning my exit. After I served the cake. After I played my role. They were going to discard me." I looked around the table. At my own expense. Literally. Because as you can all see from those papers, I've been funding the lifestyle of the woman who was planning to help her son leave me. Aunt Linda gasped audibly. Andrew shoved his chair back from the table in disgust. Derek's wife shook her head slowly, her expression horrified. That's just cruel," Patricia said, staring at her sister with something like disbelief. "Even for you that's—" "She misunderstood," Lorraine insisted, but her voice had lost all its power. "That's not what I meant." She twisted. "I twisted nothing," I said. Mark nodded. He agreed. He knew exactly what you meant. Mark still wouldn't look at anyone. His birthday cake sat untouched. His reputation lay in ruins around him, destroyed by the same ledger he'd thought was safely hidden. I stood there in the wreckage of my marriage, surrounded by shocked faces and scattered papers, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. I could breathe. The silence after I said it, after I spoke those words into existence, felt heavier than all the noise that had come before. I could breathe. And then, as if that breath had released a valve, everything happened at once. Andrew stood first, pushing his chair back with a scrape that cut through the quiet. He walked around the table to where I stood and pulled me into a brief, awkward hug. When he let go, he pressed his business card into my hand. "You call me if you need anything," he said quietly. "Anything at all. I mean it." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Patricia was on her feet now too, but she wasn't leaving. She was staring at Lorraine with an expression I'd never seen before. Raw anger mixed with something that looked like mourning. "How could you?" Patricia's voice shook. "Mom's nursing home costs. You said you were broke. You said you couldn't help. I took on extra shifts to cover your portion and you were, what? Getting your nails done? Maintaining your club membership." "That's different," Lorraine started, but the words came out weak. "How is it different? Explain it to me. How is lying to your family about money different when you do it?" Lorraine had no answer. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. Derek had pulled Mark into the corner near the kitchen, their voices low but intense. I caught fragments. "What were you thinking?" And "I trusted you," and Mark's repeated, I'm sorry." Aunt Linda gathered her purse and coat in silence, not looking at anyone. As she passed Lorraine, she paused. "I defended you. When people said you were difficult, when they said you looked down on others, I defended you. I won't be doing that anymore." She left without saying goodbye to Mark. One by one, people made their exits. Some touched my shoulder on the way out. Some avoided eye contact entirely, uncomfortable with the rawness of what they'd witnessed. Marcus and Jessica slipped out quietly, clearly wishing they'd never been invited. Derek's wife, Sarah, stopped in front of me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "For what you've been going through. For not seeing it." "You couldn't have known," I said. "Still." He squeezed my hand. "You deserve so much better than this." Within half an hour, the apartment had emptied. The only people left were me, Mark, and the wreckage we'd created. Half-eaten food, scattered ledger pages, that sad birthday cake no one had touched. And Lorraine, still sitting at the table, her mask finally shattered completely. She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. "This is your fault," she hissed at me. "You've destroyed this family. You've turned everyone against." "Get out," I said quietly. "Excuse me. Get out of my home. This is my son's home. I don't have to. It's my home too. My name is on the lease. And I'm telling you to leave." Something in my voice must have convinced her I wasn't backing down, because she gathered her things and swept toward the door with as much dignity as she could manufacture. She paused in the doorway looking back at Mark. Call me tomorrow. We'll fix this. He didn't respond. Didn't even look at her. The door closed behind her and the silence that followed felt like a physical presence. Mark stood against the wall where Derek had left him, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Diminished. Like someone had let the air out. Kayla, he said finally. Please. Let me explain. Explain what? All of it. I can explain. I don't want your explanations, Mark. I want the truth. And I already have that. I gestured to the papers still scattered across the table. 18 months of truth, documented in your own handwriting. I was trying to help my mother. She was struggling. So was I. I've been struggling. Working 2 jobs, skipping meals, going without things I needed so we could survive. And the whole time, you were stealing from me to fund her lifestyle. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me in a way that makes sense. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. She's my mother. She raised me. She needed help and I couldn't just. You couldn't just tell me the truth? You couldn't just have an honest conversation about helping her? You had to lie? Gaslight me? Make me feel crazy for noticing we were always broke. I knew you wouldn't understand. That stopped me cold. I wouldn't understand? You never gave me the chance to understand. You just decided I was the enemy and acted accordingly. That's not, I didn't. You wrote Kay doesn't know in your ledger. You documented that you were deceiving me. That wasn't an accident, Mark. That was intentional. He had nothing to say to that. I felt exhausted suddenly. Bone deep tired in a way that had nothing to do with work or sleep. I'm sleeping on the couch tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. Next steps. His voice cracked. What does that mean? It means I need space. It means I can't look at you right now. It means I don't know what happens next, but I know I can't share a bed with you tonight. Kayla, please. We can work through this. Couples therapy, whatever you need. I need to not be in the same room as you right now. I grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and a pillow from the bedroom, moving on autopilot. Mark followed me, still talking, still trying to negotiate terms like this was a business deal and not the destruction of our marriage. Don't do this. Don't shut me out. We can fix this. Some things can't be fixed. I turned to face him. Trust doesn't rebuild from rubble, Mark. You didn't just lie to me once. You lied systematically, repeatedly for 18 months. You gaslit me. You made me doubt myself. You worked with your mother to plan leaving me after the cake. I wasn't really going to. Weren't you? Because you nodded when she said it. You agreed. He looked away and that told me everything I needed to know. I made up the couch in silence while Mark stood in the doorway watching helplessly. When I finally lay down and turned away from him, he stayed there for another few minutes before retreating to the bedroom. I heard him pacing. Heard the bed creak as he sat down. Heard him get back up again. The apartment was small enough that every sound carried. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up expecting more from Mark. Instead, it was a text from Andrew. Seriously, call if you need anything. I've got a spare room if you need to get out of there. Another from Sarah. I'm so sorry we didn't see this sooner. You have our full support. Derek, I talked to Mark. He's not thinking straight right now. Give him time to process, but don't feel like you have to fix this. This is on him. Even Aunt Linda, brief but clear. You did the right thing. I screenshot each message, saving them somewhere I could access them later when the doubt inevitably crept in. As it would. I knew myself well enough to know that once the adrenaline wore off, I'd start second-guessing everything. Wondering if I'd overreacted. If I'd been too harsh. If I should have handled it privately. These messages would remind me that I wasn't crazy. That what happened was real and documented and witnessed. I opened my laptop and started searching. Tenant rights in Ohio. How to separate joint bank accounts. Average rent for studio apartments in my area. The practical realities of leaving started taking shape in spreadsheets and browser tabs. I could afford a small place on my own. Barely. It would be tight, but it would be mine. My money. My decisions. No hidden drains. No lies. The thought was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Around 2 a.m, I heard Mark's door open. Footsteps in the hallway. I closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep. Kayla. His voice was soft. Tentative. I didn't respond. I know you're awake. I can tell. I opened my eyes but didn't turn around. What do you want, Mark? To talk. To fix this. To. You can't fix this. Not tonight. Probably not ever. Don't say that. Please don't say that. Go back to bed. How can you be so calm? Doesn't this hurt you at all? I finally turned to face him. He looked terrible in the dim light from the street, hollow-eyed, defeated. Of course it hurts, I said quietly. It's been hurting for months. I just didn't know why until I found that ledger. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back the money. Doesn't give me back the time. It doesn't rebuild the trust you spent 18 months destroying. What do you want from me? Right now. Space. Tomorrow? I don't know yet. But you don't get to demand answers from me when you spent over a year lying. He stood there for a long moment, then turned and went back to the bedroom. This time he closed the door. I lay on that uncomfortable couch, staring at the ceiling, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back during dinner. The anger. The grief. The betrayal. The relief that it was finally over, even though I didn't know yet what over meant. My marriage was ending. Maybe it had ended months ago and I just hadn't realized it until I found that notebook. The tears came quietly in the dark. Not dramatic sobs, just steady, silent grief for the future I'd thought we were building and the person I'd thought I'd married. But underneath the grief was something else. Something that felt like the first breath after being underwater too long. Freedom. That word stayed with me as morning light crept through the living room window and my back protested the couch's lumpy cushions. I'd barely slept, but I felt more clear-headed than I had in months. I had work in 3 hours. I had a life to dismantle. And I needed to start now while my resolve was still sharp. I took photos first. Every room in the apartment. Every surface. Documentation of the condition we'd maintained, proof I'd left things intact. My phone's camera roll filled with images that would protect my security deposit if Mark tried to claim otherwise later. Then I started the mental inventory. What had I brought into this marriage? My grandmother's quilt. The bookshelf my dad built. Kitchen items from my first apartment. My clothes, obviously. The small desk I'd used since college. What was jointly purchased needed to stay at least for now. The couch I was sleeping on. The bed. The TV Mark had insisted on upgrading. Let him keep all of it. I wanted nothing that would require negotiation. I heard Mark's alarm go off in the bedroom. Heard him moving around. The shower started. I opened my laptop and navigated to our bank's website. It took 15 minutes to open a new checking account in my name only at a different bank entirely. I'd transfer my next paycheck there. And the one after that. He'd have no access. No way to drain it for his mother's next emergency. When Mark emerged, dressed for work, I was making coffee like nothing had changed. "Morning," he said cautiously. "Morning. Did you sleep okay?" "Fine." The lie was easier than the truth. He didn't need to know my back ached or that I'd lain awake until 4 calculating apartment deposits and moving costs. "Kayla, can we talk? Really talk?" "Not now. I have work." "Tonight then?" "Maybe." Another lie. I had no intention of having that conversation. Not until I had somewhere else to go. He left for work 20 minutes later and I spent my morning making phone calls. First to my bank, removing Mark from any communications about my student loans. Then to the internet provider, changing the account password. Then to every shared streaming service, every app, every digital footprint of our joint life. Each changed password felt like locking a door he'd never have the key to again. During my lunch break, I met Andrew at a coffee shop halfway between our workplaces. He'd texted that morning offering to connect me with someone who could explain my legal options. "This is Melissa," he said, introducing me to a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. "She's a paralegal. Does family law stuff. She agreed to meet with you off the clock." Melissa ordered tea and got straight to business. Andrew gave me the basics. Joint account, systematic withdrawal without your knowledge, no kids. "No kids," I confirmed. "That simplifies things. Ohio is an equitable distribution state, but since you're not filing for divorce yet, you're just separating, right?" "Right." "Then your main concerns are financial disentanglement and protecting yourself from future liability. You've already opened a new account." "This morning." "Good. Stop contributing to the joint account entirely." Transfer only what's legally yours. Half of the current balance, no more. Document everything. If there are joint credit cards, you need to know the balances. He could rack up debt and you'd be equally liable. My stomach dropped. How much debt are we talking? Pull your credit report. Today. Make sure you know exactly what you're dealing with. She walked me through the next steps. Document everything. Keep copies of the ledger. Screenshot any threatening or manipulative texts. Know my rights as a tenant. I could stay in the apartment if my name was on the lease, or I could leave and he'd be responsible for the full rent. He might try to guilt you, Melissa warned. Say you're abandoning him, that you're being cruel. Don't engage. Keep everything factual and documented. Emotion is his weapon. Facts are yours. By the time I returned to work, I had a clear action plan. It felt like armor. That evening, Mark tried again. I talked to a therapist about us. He said over microwaved leftovers neither of us was really eating. She has availability next week. Couples session. I'm not interested in couples therapy. Why not? We need help working through this. You need help. I need distance. That's not fair, Kayla. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidents. This was 18 months of intentional deception. I was trying to help my mother. By stealing from me. By lying to me. By making me feel crazy for noticing we were always broke. His expression shifted to something harder. You're being unreasonable. Lots of couples deal with financial stress. That doesn't mean you just give up. There was the defensiveness I'd been waiting for. I'm looking for my own place, I said calmly. What? I can't live like this. I need my own space. You're leaving me? I'm leaving this situation. What happens to us, I don't know yet. But I can't stay here. This is insane. You're throwing away 3 years of marriage because you stole from me. Repeatedly. Systematically. With your mother's encouragement. And when caught, you planned to leave me anyway. I wasn't really going to. You nodded when she said it, Mark. Don't lie to me about what I saw. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Fine. Leave. See if I care. See if you can even afford rent on your own. And there was the real concern. Not losing me. Losing my income. I'll manage, I said quietly. He stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. I cleaned up dinner alone, then returned to my laptop and pulled my credit report like Melissa had advised. My hands shook as I logged in and waited for the information to load. The joint credit card showed a balance of $8,400. Higher than I'd thought. Much higher. I scrolled through recent charges. Restaurants I'd never been to. Cash advances I'd never authorized. A jewelry purchase last month for $600. Jewelry. I looked at my bare ring finger. I'd stopped wearing my wedding band after the dinner. Where was that $600 jewelry? I pulled up Mark's social media out of morbid curiosity. There 3 weeks ago was a photo his mother had posted. Lorraine wearing a new necklace thanking my generous son for an early birthday gift. $600. On our credit card. For her. I screenshot everything. The next day, Derek showed up at the apartment unannounced. Mark was at work. Derek had Chinese takeout and an apologetic expression. I should have said something sooner, he said, setting the food on the counter. I knew something was off with Mark's stories. They never quite made sense. It's not your fault. Still, I lent him money. Believed his excuses. And the whole time Derek shook his head. Sarah and I talked. We're done helping Lorraine. He lied to us too. Said she couldn't afford her medication co-pays. We found out she spent $300 at a spa that same week. I'm sorry you're dealing with this too. Don't apologize. You're the victim here. He looked at me seriously. When you're ready to move, call me. I'll help. Sarah will too. No questions asked. Why are you being so nice to me? Because someone should be. And because Mark's my brother, but that doesn't make what he did okay. Some of us actually care about doing what's right. After he left, I sat with his wife Sarah's phone number saved in my contacts and felt something close to hope. Not everyone in Mark's family was like Lorraine. Not everyone prioritized appearances over integrity. 2 days later, I heard about the apartment through a coworker who knew someone who knew Ruth, the bakery owner. Small studio above the shop. Affordable rent if I was willing to help with morning prep a few days a week. I visited on my lunch break, climbing the narrow stairs at the back of the building with my heart hammering. Ruth was 60-something, white hair pulled back in a practical bun, flour dusting her apron. She greeted me with a firm handshake and direct eye contact. "So you need a place quick," she said. Not a question. Yes. Leaving someone? No judgment in her tone. Just fact-seeking. Yes. Good for you. Took me too long to leave my first husband. Wish I'd done it sooner. He showed me the space. One room really. Kitchenette along one wall. Bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. Slanted ceilings that gave it character. Old hardwood floors that creaked. Windows facing east, letting in morning light. Smelled like bread. Warm and yeasty and comforting. Rent $650 a month, Ruth said. But if you can help downstairs a couple mornings a week, maybe 4 to 7 a.m., I'll drop it to $500. And you can take home day-old bread. Saves me from tossing it. $500. I could manage that. Barely. But I could manage it. Morning shifts would be mixing dough, shaping loaves, basic prep. Nothing complicated. I'll train you. I looked around that small, bright space and imagined waking up here. Alone but not lonely. Poor but not stolen from. Starting over but on honest ground. When can I move in? First of the month? That's a week away. Perfect. Ruth pulled out a lease. Simple. Straightforward. No hidden clauses. I signed it right there, my hands shaking, and gave her a deposit I'd been saving in cash. "You're doing the right thing," Ruth said as I left. "Whatever you're leaving behind, you're doing the right thing." I believed her. I believed Ruth. And a week later, on a gray Saturday morning that threatened rain, I was loading my life into Derek's borrowed pickup truck. Derek arrived at 7 with Sarah and 2 of my co-workers from the clinic, Jennifer and Mike, who'd volunteered without me even asking. They brought coffee in a cardboard carrier and rolls of packing tape, and we got to work with quiet efficiency. Mark stood in the doorway of the bedroom watching. Not helping. Just watching with his arms crossed and an expression that cycled between hurt and anger and something that might have been regret. "You're really doing this," he said. Not a question. "I'm really doing this." Running away. That's what this is. I folded a sweater into a box and didn't respond. Guess you never really cared. If you did, you'd stay and work on this. Jennifer glanced at me, eyebrows raised. I shook my head slightly. Not worth engaging. The truth was, I didn't have much to take. Clothes, obviously. Books that had been mine before the marriage. Kitchen items I'd brought from my first apartment. A mixing bowl my aunt gave me, utensils that predated Mark. My grandmother's quilt. The small desk my father built when I was in college. Everything else could stay. The couch, the TV, the bed we'd shared. I wanted nothing that would require negotiation or give him an excuse to contact me later. By 10 o'clock, most of my belongings were in boxes stacked near the door. Derek and Mike were loading the truck while Sarah and Jennifer helped me do a final sweep of the apartment. Mark's phone rang. Lorraine's name lit up the screen. He declined the call. It rang again 30 seconds later. Declined again. And again. This time he just let it ring out. "She's been calling non-stop," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Ever since the dinner. Calling, texting. Says the family won't talk to her. Says this is all your fault." "It is my fault," I said, taping up the last box. I had the audacity to tell the truth. His phone rang again. Same name. He finally answered, stepping into the bedroom and closing the door. His voice carried anyway, irritated, defensive. "I can't talk right now, Mom. No, she's moving out. Guess she wants to. I don't know. I have to go." When he emerged, his expression was darker. "She wants to talk to you. I have nothing to say to her. She's upset. She says you've turned everyone against her." I showed them a ledger. They drew their own conclusions. "You humiliated her. She humiliated herself." We loaded the last boxes in silence. The truck was nearly full. A physical representation of how little I'd accumulated in 3 years of marriage. Or maybe how little I'd been allowed to keep. I did a final walkthrough, checking closets and drawers. The apartment looked bigger, already emptier. I felt nothing looking at it. No nostalgia. No regret. I'd never really been home. Just a place where I'd exhausted myself trying to be enough for people who would never be satisfied. I was heading down the stairs with my final bag when I heard tires screech in the parking lot. Lorraine's car, a luxury sedan she somehow still afforded, jerked into a visitor's space at an angle half over the line. She got out fast, slamming the door, and I saw immediately that something had broken in her. Her makeup was smudged. Her hair, usually perfect, looked hastily arranged. Her expression was wild in a way I'd never seen, raw panic mixed with fury. "You," she said, spotting me on the stairs. Her voice carried across the parking lot. "You did this." I kept walking toward the truck. Derek appeared at my elbow, protective. "You destroyed my family," Lorraine continued, following me, her voice rising. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You turned my own sister against me. You're a vengeful little nobody who never deserved my son in the first place." A neighbor's door opened. Someone was watching. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," Derek said evenly. "Don't tell me to calm down. This is between me and her." I set my bag in the truck bed and turned to face Lorraine. "There is no me and her. There's nothing between us anymore. I want those papers back. The ledger copies. You had no right to go through Mark's private things. That's invasion of privacy. I could sue you for defamation." "Sue me," I said calmly. "Those are accurate records of financial transactions. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation." Her face flushed deeper red. "You have no idea what it takes to maintain certain standards. The pressure. The expectations. You grew up with nothing. You don't understand. I understand that you stole from me to maintain an image. I understand that you looked down on me while I funded your lifestyle. I understand perfectly." She switched tactics abruptly, her voice dropping to something almost pleading. "We're still family. This can all be forgotten. Just come back inside. Talk to Mark. Work this out like adults. Stop making trouble and we can all move past this awkwardness." The desperation would have been pathetic if it weren't so revealing. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. Sorry the performance had collapsed. "No," I said simply. "No. No amount of spin or pressure or guilt will make me pretend this didn't happen. The financial records are backed up in multiple locations. Your family knows the truth. That's not changing because it's inconvenient for you." I turned toward the apartment entrance where Mark had finally emerged, hovering uncertainly on the walkway. "Mark," I said loud enough to carry. "I hope someday you understand what you traded away. Not just our marriage. Your integrity. Your family's respect. Any claim to being a decent partner. You gave all of that up to prop up her delusions." "Kayla, please," he started. I held up a hand. "I'm done listening to explanations that don't explain anything. You chose your mother's pride over our future. Over my dignity. Over basic honesty. You did it knowingly, repeatedly, systematically. You documented it. You gaslit me when I questioned it. You planned to leave me after the cake, while I served food I couldn't afford." My voice was steady, factual. The anger had burned out weeks ago, leaving only tired clarity. "That's not something sorry fixes. That's not something therapy fixes. That's who you chose to be. So now you get to live with that choice." Mark opened his mouth. Closed it. He had nothing to say that would matter. "Thank you," I said to Derek and Sarah. "For everything." Derek nodded. "Anytime." I climbed into the passenger seat of the truck. Sarah got in the back. As we pulled away from the apartment complex, I didn't look back. Didn't crane my neck for one last view. Just faced forward. Lorraine was still standing in the parking lot, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Mark had already gone back inside. The drive to my new apartment took 15 minutes. We unloaded in half the time it took to pack, carrying boxes up the narrow stairs to the studio above Ruth's bakery. Ruth had left the door unlocked for me. A note on the counter read, "Welcome home. Come down for dinner later if you want." By noon everything was inside. Derek and Sarah helped me arrange the few pieces of furniture I had. The desk against one wall, the bookshelf perpendicular to it. My grandmother's quilt on the air mattress that would serve as a bed until my real one arrived next week. "It's a good space," Sarah said, looking around. "Small but good." "It's perfect," I said and meant it. After they left, Ruth appeared with pasta in a ceramic dish and a bottle of wine. "Figured you wouldn't feel like cooking," she said, setting both on my counter. "And you look like you could use company. Unless you need alone time. I can go." Stay, I said. Please. We sat on the floor. I didn't have a table yet, and ate pasta and drank wine while Ruth told me about leaving her first husband 30 years ago. Thought I'd be alone forever, she said. Thought that was the price of choosing myself. Turned out I was wrong. Found better people. Built a better life. But even if I'd been alone, it still would have been worth it. Being lonely beats being disrespected. We talked until the light outside faded and the bakery below grew quiet. About marriages that looked good from the outside but rotted from within. About rebuilding. About the specific exhaustion of being underestimated by people who should have valued you. When Ruth finally left, I was alone in my sparse apartment with its hardwood floors and slanted ceilings. I lay down on the air mattress and stared at the ceiling and realized something had shifted. I wasn't anxious about money. For the first time in months, maybe years, my financial situation was clear. I knew exactly what I earned. Exactly what I owed. No hidden drains. No secret withdrawals. No lies. I was broke, yes. But I was broke honestly. And that made all the difference. My phone buzzed. Mark's name appeared with a long text preview. Another explanation. Another justification. I muted his number without reading it. Not out of anger. Out of self-preservation. Out of simple recognition that some conversations would never lead anywhere productive. The apartment settled into silence around me. Not lonely silence. Honest silence. Through the floorboards I could smell tomorrow's bread beginning to rise in the kitchen below. Something warm and real preparing itself in the dark. I closed my eyes and slept better than I had in months. I woke to darkness and the smell of yeast. My alarm read 4:45 a.m., 15 minutes before I needed to be downstairs. It was Tuesday, one of my bakery mornings, and my body had already started adapting to the split schedule. Medical billing Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Bakery prep Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 5 to 8. Retail shifts dropped entirely after Ruth offered me more hours. I was still exhausted. Still working too much. But it was a different kind of tired now. Honest tired. Earned tired. I dressed quickly in the dark and headed downstairs. Ruth was already there, pulling ingredients from the walk-in cooler, her movements efficient from decades of practice. Morning, she said without looking up. Can you start on the cinnamon roll dough? Recipes on the board. The work was physical. Mixing, kneading, shaping. My arms ached by the end of each shift, but there was something satisfying about it. Tangible. I put in effort and got immediate results. Dough that rose, bread that browned, pastries that smelled like comfort. No emotional manipulation. No hidden agendas. Just flour and water and heat producing exactly what they promised. By 6, the first customers started arriving. Jim and his construction crew, ordering coffee and donuts before heading to whatever job site they were working that week. Mrs. Chin, who bought a single dinner roll every morning and stayed to chat for half an hour about her grandchildren. The Hoffmans, a young couple with a toddler who discovered an obsession with cinnamon buns. Ruth introduced me to each of them by name. This is Kayla. She's helping out mornings now. They greeted me warmly, asked basic questions. Where I was from, how long I'd been in the neighborhood, and accepted my simple answers without prying. No one knew about Mark or Lorraine or ledgers hidden under beds. Here I was, just Kayla. The woman who shaped their morning pastries and got their coffee order right. It felt like breathing after being underwater. Over weeks, then months, I started recognizing the rhythms of the place. Which customers wanted conversation and which preferred silence. When to prep extra blueberry muffins because Tuesdays were busy. How to tell when the oven temperature was slightly off just by how the bread smelled. The bakery's warmth, literal and metaphorical, seeped into my bones, replacing the cold anxiety that had characterized my marriage. My finances were still tight. Painfully tight. But for the first time since the wedding I could see them clearly. I knew exactly what came in. Exactly what went out. No surprises. No hidden drains. I set up a simple budget on a spreadsheet. Rent, utilities, student loans, groceries, phone. Everything accounted for. Nothing mysterious. There was no surplus. Some months I had $20 left over. Some months I had nothing. But there was also no one stealing from me behind my back, and that absence of betrayal felt like wealth. I opened a savings account, something I'd never been able to maintain when I was with Mark. Started depositing $5 or $10 whenever I could spare it. The amounts were laughable. Insignificant. But watching that balance grow from $0 to $47 over 2 months felt like a genuine victory. Small dignities started accumulating. I bought a used coffee maker from the thrift store for $8 and nearly cried when I made my first pot at home. No more $4 coffee shop purchases I couldn't afford. Just decent coffee I'd made myself. I got a haircut at a budget salon. $12. The stylist did a good job, and when I paid I felt absurdly proud. No guilt. No justification. Just a simple transaction for something I wanted. I bought new socks, 6 pairs for $10, and threw away the ones with holes I'd been wearing for 2 years because we couldn't afford new ones. These moments shouldn't have felt significant. But they did. Because they were mine. My money. My choices. No one critiquing or undermining or stealing. My self-respect was returning in increments so small I almost didn't notice until I looked back and realized how far I'd come. I heard about Mark and Lorraine occasionally through Derek, who checked in every few weeks. Mark had moved to a smaller apartment after realizing he couldn't cover the old rent alone. Lost his sales job. Derek suspected performance issues related to stress. Was working retail now. Something hourly. Lorraine had been forced to sell her house when her sister and other family members cut her off financially. She downsized to a condo, traded her luxury car for something practical, let her country club membership lapse. The facade had collapsed completely without other people's money holding it up. I felt no triumph hearing these updates. No satisfaction in their struggles. Just a distant sadness for lives that could have been different if they'd chosen differently. Mark asked about you, Derek said once carefully during a phone call. Wanted to know if you were okay. I'm fine, I said. Should I tell him that? You can tell him I'm fine but not interested in reconnecting. Fair enough. I didn't hate Mark. Didn't hate Lorraine either, surprisingly. I just didn't want them in my life. Had learned that forgiveness wasn't required for moving forward. That you could acknowledge someone hurt you and still choose to leave that hurt in the past without reconciling. They didn't rent space in my head anymore. 6 months after the birthday dinner, I woke on a Sunday morning without an alarm. Sunlight streamed through the east-facing windows. The bakery below was closed, Ruth's one day off. I made coffee in my thrift store coffee maker and sat by the window watching the neighborhood wake up. A jogger passed. A dog walker. Cars beginning to populate the street as people headed to brunch or church or wherever their Sundays took them. I realized, sitting there in comfortable silence, that I was happy. Not perfectly happy. Not without challenges or struggles. But genuinely content in a way I'd never been during my marriage. I had friends now. Ruth, obviously. Some of the bakery regulars I'd gotten to know. A few people from work I'd started having lunch with. My student loan balance had dropped by $3,000. Not much in the grand scheme, but progress. Visible progress. I'd started cooking real meals for myself instead of surviving on microwave dinners. Discovered I actually enjoyed it when there was no pressure, no one to please but myself. I'd rediscovered reading. Checked out novels from the library and read them slowly, savoring them. Something I'd abandoned years ago when all my time went to work and managing Mark's lies. I thought sometimes about that ledger. The small notebook that had revealed everything. Part of me wished I'd never found it. That I could still be living in ignorant stability, unaware of the betrayal. But most of me was grateful. Better a hard truth that forces growth than a comfortable lie that slowly suffocates you. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, Derek's wife. Family barbecue next Saturday. Derek's grilling. Would love if you could come. Mark and Lorraine not invited, just so you know. I smiled and typed back, I'll be there. Should I bring anything? Her response came quickly. Just yourself. I'd kept the good parts of Mark's family. The people who'd shown integrity when it mattered, and shed the toxic ones. Built boundaries that protected me without isolating me. It felt like threading a needle successfully. Difficult but worthwhile. The future wasn't glamorous. I'd be working multiple jobs for a while. Living in this small studio. Rebuilding slowly. Probably alone romantically for the foreseeable future. I had no interest in dating, no energy for it. But the future was honest. And it was mine. I stood and refilled my coffee, looking around the small bright space that smelled perpetually of bread. Modest. Simple. Nothing like what I'd imagined when I'd first married Mark and dreamed of suburban homes and financial stability. But it was real. Built on truth instead of lies. On my labor instead of stolen money. On choices I made freely instead of manipulation I survived. I heard Ruth moving around downstairs, probably prepping for tomorrow despite it being her day off. Heard the building settle and creak in the morning warmth. Heard my own breathing steady and calm. And I knew with absolute certainty that I'd choose this truth over that comfortable betrayal every single time. Not because revenge had given me power. It hadn't really. The dinner revelation had just exposed what was already broken. But because honesty had given me back something more valuable than victory. It had given me back myself. If this story of calculated revenge had you holding your breath, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Kayla placed those ledger copies beside each dessert plate, exposing 18 months of lies in one devastating moment. What was your favorite moment?